Welcome to Yuno and Kenzo Koga, where ancient wisdom meets modern life.
Subscribe now and join us on this journey of awakening. If this resonates, tap like and share it with someone who would appreciate a moment of peace today. And feel free to share any thoughts or reflections in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Welcome to the debate.
It's good to be here.
So today we're diving into something I think many of us feel almost constantly, that pressure, the relentless hum of expectation to achieve more, to strive harder, to control every little variable in our lives.
Mm-hmm. It's pervasive.
Exactly. We're often told, almost implicitly, that this relentless effort, this constant striving is the key, the only key, really, to a fulfilling and successful life. But what if, and this is the core of our discussion, what if that very approach is, holding us back? What if it's the static blocking our true potential for peace?
Right. So the central question we're grappling with is, does true progress, peace, and fulfillment arise from stopping trying, from surrendering to a kind of natural flow, or does it actually need a continued degree of, let's say, conscious effort, striving, and active engagement with the world?
Precisely. And I'll be championing a perspective that's, rooted deeply in some ancient wisdom traditions, suggesting that our modern impulse to ceaselessly strive often just leads to exhaustion and, frankly, disconnect. It can be deeply counterproductive.
And while I definitely acknowledge the dangers of excessive striving, who hasn't felt that burnout? I'll be presenting an alternative view. I'll argue that purposeful effort and intentional engagement, they remain crucial, perhaps even indispensable for a truly meaningful life.
Okay, so let me lay out my perspective first. Our modern society, its pace is just relentless, right? It's powerfully conditioned us. From when we're young, we absorb this idea that only those who push constantly, who are never quite satisfied, are the ones who really win.
You see it everywhere.
Everywhere. The glorification of the 18-hour workday, the constant demand for self-optimization, the endless chase for the next big thing. Get up earlier, hustle harder, never stop aiming for objectives. But the result? Often it's a generation that feels perpetually tired, unable to genuinely rest, or even just be without some goal looming. It's almost like the harder we try, the more lost we feel, like we're constantly swimming upstream against this current we think we have to conquer. And it's right here, I think, that Taoist thought offers something quite startling, almost revolutionary. And that's the simple yet profound idea, stop trying. Now look, this isn't about apathy or abandoning life, not at all. It's about ceasing the struggle against life's natural currents, learning from nature itself. Think about water. How does it triumph? Not through force, but through gentleness, adaptability. It flows, and eventually it carves canyons through solid rock. This idea that trying too hard can backfire, it rings true in so many areas. Think about trying to change the world by sheer force. History, it's filled with examples, isn't it? People with good intentions trying so hard to impose their vision, ending up causing immense chaos, sometimes destroying the very thing they wanted to save. There's that beautiful line. The world is like a sacred vase. He who tries to hold it breaks it. True influence, I really believe, doesn't come from forcing things. It comes from inner harmony and offering a quiet, authentic example through your own transformation. Trying to force change on others, it usually just sparks resistance and drains your energy.
Okay.
Oris, consider happiness. We chase the perfect job, the ideal body, the dream partner, believing these external things will finally deliver lasting joy. But what actually happens? You get the thing, maybe feel good for a bit, and then that same underlying emptiness often creeps back in. It's the classic hedonic treadmill, right? We run and run, putting in huge effort, but basically staying in the same emotional place. So, true happiness, I'd argue, isn't something you chase like a prize. It's something you allow. You quiet the inner chatter, accept the present moment as it is, without demanding it be different. When you cease trying to be happy and simply are, happiness often just shows up. And it's the same with identity. We spend so much energy trying to be someone else, performing for others, because deep down we fear our authentic self isn't enough. It's exhausting. Peace comes when we finally embrace who we are, flaws and all. Like, a twisted old tree is still beautiful, still vital. Our quirks, our imperfections, they're part of our unique beauty. And finally, this ties into control, our obsession with controlling everything, situations, people, the future. It usually comes from fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure. So we plan meticulously, we micromanage, but absolute control, it's an illusion. The Taoist view reminds us, abandon yourself to the flow of life, for trying to control it is like trying to hold the wind. Nature doesn't force things. Rivers flow, leaves fall, seasons change. It all happens in its own time. Our struggle against that rhythm, wanting things our way now, that's a huge source of anxiety. Peace is found in letting go, trusting the natural rhythm, releasing that need to manipulate every single outcome.
Okay, I really do acknowledge the depth of what you're saying there. The perils of excessive striving, absolutely. The exhaustion of that hedonic treadmill. Yeah, many of us know that feeling intimately. And the futility of trying to exert absolute control over life's, inherent unpredictability. That's undeniable. It's clear that those frantic, anxiety-fueled attempts to force outcomes, they can be incredibly detrimental. They lead to suffering, feeling lost. However, the idea of just stopping trying, for me, presents a more complex challenge. It needs, I think, a closer look, a more nuanced examination. My view is that while, yes, surrendering to certain aspects of life's flow is incredibly wise, maybe even fundamental, purposeful effort and intentional action are, I'd argue they're not just necessary, but absolutely essential for a meaningful life, for growth, both personal and collective. And I think there's a crucial distinction here, one that, interestingly, even the wisdom you're drawing on touches upon. It's the difference between that desperate, exhausting forcing, which, agreed, is counterproductive, and what's often termed wu wei, often translated as action without tension or effortless action. But crucially, this still involves conscious effort. It's effort that's aligned, mindful, non-resistant, like a skilled artisan completely absorbed in their craft.
So if we were to just entirely stop trying in all its forms, how do we square that with the responsibilities we have? How do we cultivate ourselves really, learn and grow? How do we pursue justice in a world that often cries out for it? How do we alleviate suffering when we encounter it? Even the idea you mentioned, transforming the world not by words but by the silent example of our own transformation, that still implies an effort, doesn't it? An effort in the personal transformation itself. That's an active process of refinement, surely, not just passive acceptance.
Okay, but is that effort always outward focused?
Well, maybe not always outward, but it's still effort. And while accepting the present moment is, yes, incredibly valuable a pathway to peace, does it have to negate the human desire to aspire, to learn, improve, create? Is emptying oneself truly a complete rejection of knowledge and growth? Or maybe it's more about reevaluating the source of that knowledge, shifting from rigid ideas to a more intuitive, lived wisdom. And yes, true freedom might come from ceasing resistance, but what about the courage needed to face difficult truths or to engage in necessary struggles, even if they're hard? That flexibility of water you mentioned, it doesn't always just yield. Sometimes water carves a whole new path through persistent, directed, intentional flow, even if it's non-resistant. It actively reshapes things.
I appreciate you bringing up that distinction between forcing and wu wei, that action without tension. It is a very important nuance. But let me push back a bit on this role of effort, specifically regarding personal and world transformation. I think there's something really profound suggested here, that the greatest chaos we've seen, historically speaking, has often been caused by those who were absolutely convinced they were doing good, driven by this intense effort, to impose their visions, their truths, their systems onto everyone else. In their fervent attempts to fix the world, they frequently ended up, breaking it. A fair point about unintended consequences.
Right. And the core insight seems to be that When you try to change someone who isn't ready or simply doesn't want to change, you don't actually inspire progress. You mostly just trigger their resistance, and you wear yourself out doing it. It's like shouting into a gale force wind. The wind just pushes back harder and your voice gets lost. True influence, this perspective suggests, doesn't arise from that kind of imposition or force. It flows from harmony, from resonance, from the quiet but compelling example of your own authentic transformation. The focus is on being and alignment, maybe more than on external doing or manipulation.
Okay, I certainly concede the point about the destructive potential of imposing one's will, especially when it's driven by some dogmatic certainty. Those historical examples of forceful interventions, even well-intentioned ones, are powerful warnings. Nobody's arguing that coercion leads to lasting good. However, I'm still not fully convinced that just a silent example is always enough, particularly when we're talking about systemic injustices or trying to inspire really broad societal shifts.
But where does the silent example fall short?
Well, think about major social movements, civil rights, environmental advocacy, even local community action. Doesn't advocating for change through reasoned discussion, collective action, peaceful protests, sometimes even working within systems like legislation, doesn't that represent a vital kind of trying, one that's essential for positive transformation? It's not about imposing my will necessarily, but about articulating a shared vision, building agreement, taking deliberate collective steps. Is there a point where not trying to actively change a harmful situation or, speak truth to power actually slips into complicity, becomes an abdication of our shared responsibility? While personal transformation is fundamental, yes, I see it more as the foundation or the fuel for engaging outwardly, not the only way to have influence. It prepares us for the necessary effort.
I understand that pull, that impulse to act against injustice. Definitely. And the desire to contribute actively. But maybe let's shift focus slightly to happiness itself and how this constant trying can undermine it. You mentioned the hedonic treadmill earlier, and it really is everywhere. Just think about it, that relentless push to get things. The perfect job title, the sculpted physique, the soulmate partner. This pursuit makes happiness seem incredibly slippery, doesn't it? You reach a goal, feel that brief high, and then boom, the same sense of lack or the desire for the next thing returns pretty quickly. It's like being that hamster in the wheel. Huge effort, but you end up right back where you started.
Yeah, it's a familiar cycle for many. Exactly. So the wisdom we're exploring suggests happiness isn't some external thing you chase and capture. It's something you allow. It emerges when you can quiet that constant inner noise of striving, wanting, needing things to be different, when you accept the present moment just as it is and simply are. When you stop trying so desperately to be happy, paradoxically, happiness often finds you, not as a frantic peak, but as a kind of quiet, steady presence. It's about releasing the grip, not necessarily becoming passive. That's a really eloquent description of the hedonic treadmill, and I absolutely agree that frantic, endless chase for external badges of happiness, it's usually self-defeating, leads to perpetual dissatisfaction. We see it baked into our consumer culture. But here's my question. Should all forms of pursuit be condemned? What about the deliberate pursuit of genuinely meaningful goals, like, say, mastering a craft, creating something beautiful, raising a family with intention, or engaging in acts of service for others? While none of those guarantee constant bliss, can't they contribute profoundly to a deep sense of purpose, real satisfaction, genuine well-being?
But isn't the satisfaction in the doing, not the achieving?
Perhaps, partly. But the achievement matters too, doesn't it? This isn't about grasping for fleeting pleasures. It's about actively engaging with life in ways that build intrinsic meaning, maybe contribute to something larger than just ourselves. There's a vital difference, I think, between that desperate, anxious chase for happiness as an outcome and a more mindful, values-driven aspiration. That can be a real path to fulfillment. And what about the effort involved in developing inner qualities, like patience or compassion? Isn't that a form of trying that actually leads towards inner peace, not just temporary joy?
Okay, I see a point about distinguishing between different kinds of pursuit, and it really brings us back to this underlying theme of control. which often fuels both the frantic chase and maybe even some purposeful aspiration. Our often obsessive desire to control situations, people, the future, it generally stems from fear, right? And it consistently leads to anxiety, frustration. We're sort of programmed, often from childhood, to trust only our own efforts, to plan every step meticulously, to have rigid expectations for how things should turn out. We assume if we don't try to control everything, it'll all just collapse.
The fear of chaos, yeah.
Exactly. Yet the Taoist view, and honestly just observing life, reminds us that absolute control is fundamentally an illusion. Abandon yourself to the flow of life, for trying to control it is like trying to hold the wind. You can cup your hands all you want, the wind just slips through. Nature doesn't force anything. The river flows, leaves fall, seasons change. It all happens in its own time, following its own rhythm. Peace, then, is found in detachment from specific outcomes, in trusting this larger natural cadence and releasing that desperate need to manipulate every detail. It's about recognizing we're part of a much bigger intelligent system, not the sole directors.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. Absolute control is definitely an illusion. And fear-driven attempts to micromanage every aspect of life, they are destructive. They lead to a kind of mental prison, not freedom. That metaphor of trying to hold the wind captures the futility perfectly. However, I still think there's a subtle but important line here we need to acknowledge. A healthy amount of intentional planning, cultivating self-efficacy, taking responsible action, that's not quite the same as trying to control the wind in that negative, obsessive sense.
How do you define healthy, though? Where's that line?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? But isn't there a healthy form of agency where we try to align our actions with potential opportunities, where we prepare reasonably for the future, mitigate foreseeable risks, all without getting trapped in the anxiety of needing one specific result? Think about farming. We plant seeds. We know we can't force them to grow into towering oaks overnight, but we still carefully choose the seeds, prepare the soil, water them, ensure they get light. Those are all conscious, intentional efforts. So how do we balance trusting the flow, trusting that natural rhythm, with our uniquely human ability for foresight, for prudent preparation, for making conscious choices? How do we do that without tipping over into obsessive, fear-based control? It feels like we're meant to be active participants, not just passive watchers, even if that participation is best expressed as action without tension.
Well, it seems many of the anxieties, the feelings of being lost, that really characterize our modern lives, they stem directly from this deep-seated societal habit of relentless striving and forced control. The wisdom we've touched on today, I believe, offers a truly powerful alternative. It suggests a fundamental shift towards acceptance, towards release, and finding harmony with life's inherent natural rhythm. By embracing non-action, that wu wei, the action without tension you aptly described, and genuinely trusting the flow, we might find a profound path, a path to peace, authenticity, and a life where things unfold with a kind of natural magic rather than being forced by sheer, exhausting willpower. Perhaps the greatest suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our desperate, futile resistance to them.
And while those pitfalls of excessive, anxious effort are undeniable, and the wisdom of letting go is truly profound, the concept of stopping trying, I still maintain, needs very careful, nuanced interpretation. We have to be cautious not to accidentally advocate for a kind of harmful passivity or an abdication of responsibility where action is genuinely needed. A truly fulfilling life, as I see it, likely requires a sophisticated balancing act. It needs to integrate that deep understanding of natural flow, the wisdom to let go when appropriate, with a firm commitment to purposeful action, intentional growth, and responsible, mindful engagement with the world and with others. The constant challenge, then, is discerning, with wisdom, between that destructive forcing and constructive, mindful, aligned effort.
Indeed, this discussion has certainly highlighted a rich and complex tension that's just inherent in being human, hasn't it? It compels us all, I think, to reflect more deeply on our own personal relationship with striving and with surrender.
Absolutely. And the insights we have explored hopefully offer a path toward a deeper understanding of our place in the world and the diverse ways we might navigate towards greater peace and fulfillment, paths that continue to challenge and inspire us.
Thank you for being here with us at Yuno and Kenzo Koga, where ancient wisdom meets modern life.
Subscribe now and join us on this journey of awakening. If this resonates, tap like and share it with someone who would appreciate a moment of peace today. And feel free to share any thoughts or reflections in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.